Hey students, are you enjoying these coaching sessions we're having every week? You better answer with enthusiasm. Are you enjoying these coaching sessions? That's better. You should know by now that Jesus is my big brother. I tell you that occasionally, so I have street cred. I'm Coach Jim, and it's time to break down this week's clip. Looks like Gary here is, oh my, wow, incredible dismount. It looks like his form is spot on. I see no issues with this clip. Everything looks perfect. If you can break a diving board, it's the equivalent of slam dunking a basketball and shattering the backboard. This is the Michael Jordan of divers. That guy crushed it. Speaking of crushing it, Jesus is my big brother, and he took the nails for you and me. Don't ever forget that. I want you to take this home with you. This guy is an awesome diver, but Jesus is an awesomest one. Coach Jim, out.
Oh yeah, there we go. Coach Jim, that's my fault. I shouldn't have turned that off when I was back there. All right, yeah, Coach Jim will be here with us next week. We've had people ask us who it is. It's not me. It's not Estrella. I hope it's not Estrella, because yeah, she was sick the other day, and it kind of sounded like Coach Jim is not ever good. All right, so hey, James, if you got a Bible, grab it, open it. James chapter 4, meet me in verse 10, because as one of my favorite songs from one of my favorite movies, Smokey and the Bandit would say, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there. All right, that's for all my adults in the room. That's not for you guys. Great movie, by the way. So here we go. Back in June, my wife, she went on a work trip to Tulsa, and she left me at home with both of my kids. And this was her first time to be away overnight without them for their entirety of their lives. So I was like, I got it, babe. Everything's going to be good. So she left, and we're having a great time. Thursday comes along. I realize we're out of some groceries, so I'm being a good husband, and I said, you know what, babe? I'm gonna go to the grocery store. So I grabbed the kids, we jumped in the car, and I don't know why we went to Whole Foods. Like, we're not bougie like that, but I think it's because I wanted some of that death water, Corey. Like, I think that's what it was, like, that's the only place I could find it. If you've ever had death water, it's like really good water. So I was like, I want to go to Whole Foods. So we went to Whole Foods, and we bought all the groceries we needed, and it was way more expensive than ever before. And we're about to check out, and as we're going down the last lane, my daughter stops and goes, Dad, can we get those? And they were these suckers. And I looked at them, and I picked them up, and I read them, and I'm like, okay, they're sugar-free, and they're people that are dentists, approved by 9 out of 10 dentists. Like, you should take these. And so I'm like, hey, good for your teeth, good for you. Let's take them home. I said, yes, you can have these. And so we bought all that and the rest of our groceries. We went home, we went to bed. Friday comes, we wake up, and I promised them I'd take them to the zoo. We went to the zoo, had a great time, saw the lions and the tigers and the bears, oh my, and all the things. And then we came back because it was time for lunch. And at lunch, I told them, I said, hey, after lunch, we're gonna have quiet time. Now, I don't know if you guys know what quiet time, or maybe you had quiet time growing up. Quiet time in my house is, I'm giving you your iPads. I want you to go to your room because Dad's gonna take a nap. So don't come out until I come back and tell you it is time to get up. And hey, they listened, all except for one thing. They left me alone, they let me sleep, but they left their rooms. And the reason why I know that is because eventually I woke up. And when I woke up, I came downstairs and I started seeing all these candy wrappers everywhere. And then I saw the sucker package, and it's laying on the ground, and I'm looking at it, and they're all gone. And then I turned the corner, and when I turned the corner, my son is smiling from ear to ear and has 4 suckers in his mouth. And he's like, yeah, I'm it. And I was like, they're sugar-free. What's the worst thing that can happen? It got really bad. Because that night, we were going to dinner, and I said, Ella, what do you want to have for dinner? I'll take you guys out to eat. And she said, I want chips and salsa. Amen, sister. We're going to get chips and salsa tonight. So we go to our favorite restaurant. We get to the restaurant. Logan's a little bit fussy. We walk in. The host says, hey, how many guys, like me, Ella, and then I need a high chair. So he grabs the stuff and says, follow me. And as he says, follow me, my son just goes, "Bleh," and throws up over me. I'm like, ugh. Like, it's gross. And like, it's like if you've ever, well, you probably have, if you've ever been thrown up on or you've thrown up, like, it's like time just stops. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I start seeing all these eyes. It's like everyone's coming out of the woodwork. It's like, who got shot? Like, what's happening in here? Like, and people are looking at us, and then the dude throws up on me again. I'm covered in throw up. It is disgusting. People are staring at us, and I was a little bit embarrassed. And in a similar way, there's a lot of us here tonight that are covered in something that's equally disgusting. And the thing that you're covered with isn't something called vomit or throw up. The thing that you're covered up with is this thing called pride. Pride is disgusting. Pride is something that everyone sees at you, and then like when they see you, they kind of give you that look like, oh, that's kind of disgusting, and they don't want to stay or come near you. Like when I had throw up all over me, here's what did not happen. People did not just run out of their being like, let me give you a hug. You look like you could use a hug. That didn't happen. It's the same thing that happens when you are wearing this thing called pride. It's disgusting. It's repelling. People don't like to be around it, and it shows up, and you guys know this. It can show up in your actions and the way that you talk. Like, man, I'm all that. It can show up in the way that we treat other people. And even pride sometimes can show up in our insecurities. I'm just never gonna be good enough. I'm never gonna be able to and people just look at it and they're like, I don't wanna be around that. So pride is something that is disgusting, but it's not only disgusting, it's also something that's destructive. Like if you've ever had that friend that, you know, every time you get into an argument with them and then hey, it ain't ever their fault, it's always your fault. You guys have ever had a friend like that? And you're like, man, like it's always like, let me make it about you. It ain't about you, but let me make it about you. And they're always doing that. Or maybe you dated someone like that, girls. Maybe you had that guy that always wanted to make you feel like it was always your fault. Like, oh, the reason why you made me mad is because you didn't let me do what I wanted to do. It's called pride. Let me tell you, it's destructive because if you're ever in a relationship with someone that is prideful, you're not in that relationship for very long. And then there's some of you, let me just be quite frank with you tonight. You're here and you're checking out this church thing and like maybe someone drug you here, or maybe you're just kind of showing up and you're checking all this stuff out and you hear us talking about Jesus and you're kind of like, man, I don't know if I really want to have a relationship with Jesus. And listen, if you're here and that's you in your story, I'm glad you're here. But like what's holding you back is actually pride, and you're like, you know, I don't really want to get into a relationship with Jesus because I don't know what other people may think about me, or I don't know what it's gonna cost me if I end up following Jesus. Maybe I'm gonna lose a bunch of friends, and I don't know if I really want to, and those things are very valid, but pride is so destructive that if you end tonight and you left and something happened to you where you passed away, you would spend eternity apart from God. But I think the greatest problem with pride is that every person struggles with pride, but no one thinks that they struggle with pride. We all struggle with pride. I struggle with pride. Like if you think that I can get up here and talk about something like this and you're like, oh, he's got it. No, I don't have it all together in this topic. So what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna dig into James chapter 4. And what James is gonna do is he's gonna help us see if we struggle with pride. And not only is he gonna help us see if we struggle with pride, but he's actually going to give us the way that we can overcome this thing called pride, how we can have victory over pride in Christ Jesus and what that looks like. And so he starts in James chapter 4, we're gonna start in verse 11. This is what James says. He says, brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. Now we pause for just a second. We need to remember that James is speaking to a Jewish audience. And so he's throwing out these different words that sometimes, like if we're just sitting here in church, we may not understand up front. The Jewish people had the law, the Old Testament law. So he's speaking against that. We need to understand that, just kind of bridge the gap. So the law that we're under is the law of grace, completely different. So, but he is talking about the Old Testament law. So he says, speak against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver, being God, and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you who are to judge, who are you to judge your neighbors? So when it comes to pride, James says you may struggle with pride if you put people down. And he tells us there's a couple of different ways that we can put people down. It can be in the things that we say to people, to their face, or better yet, maybe it's the things that we say behind the people behind their back after they leave the conversation, and we just like, oh yeah, your shirt looks cute. That was ugly. That's how we can put people down. Another way, this is what Christians do all the time, people who claim to be followers of Jesus. What we like to do is we like to judge people based off of where we're at and where they're not. So like, oh, I read my Bible, you don't. You're going to hell. Oh, you prayed for 30 seconds? I prayed for 3 hours this morning. I'm closer to Jesus than you are. That's pride. What happens in pride and when we put people down is we elevate ourselves to a level that we think people will never get to. It's kind of like this in middle school. My mom and dad, they sat me down one day and said, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And they're like, well, let's just have this conversation. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to think about it. And here's the question. Then we want you to answer, what are you passionate about? Go and think about it. And so I went and thought about it because they're like, what you're passionate about? Like, oh, maybe you should pursue that. So I was like, okay, great. So I went and I thought about it and I was like, I'm passionate about two things. A, girls, and basketball. And I'm like, I don't think my parents want me to be a professional person that picks up girls. Like, I don't think that's what they want for my life, so I picked basketball, which was the better choice. And so basically, if I could just illustrate what I wanted to do, my life was elevated around this idea of a ladder that looked like me climbing the ladder to a point in my career of basketball. I'm not going to the top because I'm terrified of heights. I always want to, and I had leg day yesterday. My legs are hurting. I want to get up here in my career because I wanted people to look up at me like you're looking up at me. And I wanted them to want to be me because I was elevated to a place that they weren't. And then I wanted to be able to look down on them and say, you're never going to be where I'm at. This is what pride looks like. This is what it looks like for us to put people down. We believe, Christians believe that there's some spiritual ladder that we've got to climb up in order to make God love us more. And so we'll read the Bible and we'll do certain things and we'll come up this ladder and we'll get to a certain point where we're just sitting here and we're just looking down on people and be like, hey, you ain't even paying attention to the guy speaking tonight. So like you're definitely not a part of Jesus's team. And we get to this place where we think, no one's ever going to be on my level spiritually. Can I tell you the problem with this? The problem is that the gospel isn't about us climbing up some spiritual ladder. The gospel is about the God of this universe who was at the top of this ladder, coming down the ladder and dying on a cross so that we could have a relationship with him. And what he literally did is when Jesus died on the cross, he took the ladder and he put it away. I'm not gonna take it all the way off stage, but he put it away. He told us never to take it back up and put it back up again. And when we struggle with pride by putting people down, the way that we get over that is by us being gripped by this thing called grace. And we need to realize that if it was not for the grace of God, that person that you're looking at that's struggling with porn that you're downing on, or the person that's sleeping around or getting drunk or lying or whatever you're looking at and you're looking down on them, if it wasn't for the grace of God, you would be in the same place that they are. So the way that we overcome that part of pride is by us being gripped by the grace of God, by us looking up not at ourselves, but at a Savior who died on the cross, who extended grace to us so that we could extend grace and compassion to someone else. That's how we do it. So you may struggle with pride if you put people down, but James continues on with us, and in verse 13, he says, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. Quick poll, where are all my planners at? If you like to plan, show me your hand real quick. All right, listen. If you have your hands raised, I want you to look up right at me. I wish that I was a planner, but I'm not. I want to try so hard to be a planner, but like, if we go on a family vacation, my wife's the planner, and like that's how it always happens. She's the planner. So like, if we're going on vacation, she packs 3 or 5 days before we leave, like her and the kids. And I'm like, that's amazing. She gets all the snacks from Walmart and everything like that, and it's all there. I pack 1 to 2 hours before we leave, and I'm walking into my wife. I'm like, hey, can I go get toothpaste from Walmart real quick? Because I'm forgetting stuff. So here's the question: is James saying that my wife, because she's a planner, needs to go and repent and turn to Jesus? Is James saying that if you are a planner that you need to repent tonight? That's not what James is saying. There's nothing wrong with planning. But what he's pointing out is the heart behind the plan. Because the heart behind someone that struggles with pride is this thing called control. So if you're here, you may struggle with pride if you plan like you're in control. Now, here's the problem with trying to be in control when you're not really in control. You and I aren't that smart, and we're not that good. We can make plans. We can say we're going to go to this college, we're going to play this sport, we're going to do all of these different things. But James points out a flaw in our plan. And here's what he says. He says, you can't see what God sees. You and I, we see right now in the here and now. Like, you're not that smart, you're not that good, you're not that intelligent, you can't see what's going to happen tomorrow. So he would begin to ask you the questions: why are you trying to control the outcome? Why are you trying to make every decision based off of what you want and saying, you know what, God, this is the college I'm going to this college, I've already applied, and I'm not saying don't apply, I've applied, I'm doing this, and hey, God, I need you to bless this. That's what it looks like for us to be in control, and that's what it looks like for us to have pride. But here's the bad news about it. James again says, you and I can't see tomorrow, but there is someone who can see tomorrow. His name is God. God sees you right now where you're at. God sees you not only where you're at right now, but at the very same time, God sees where you're gonna be at 11:59 p.m. tonight. And at the same time, he sees where you're gonna be at 7:16 tomorrow, and 3:33, and 3 months from now, and 90 days from now, and a year from now, and he sees it all at the same time. So are we too arrogant to believe that we should say, okay, God, like, let me invite you in on the back end, instead of saying, you know what, God, you see what I don't see. Let me know what your will is, and I'm gonna consult you first, and I'm gonna go to you and say, God, what do you want me to do? But what keeps us from doing that is pride. We feel like we got to control everything. We got to feel like we got a plan, and when our plans become all about us and what I want, and again, he says, hey, here's the problem with that. Your life is like a vapor. It's like a mist. Now, what is that? Appears for a little while and then it vanishes. What does that look like? It looks like this. It's what your life looks like, all of it. Birth, middle school, high school, job, marriage, kids, retirement, death. It's gone, it's here and it's gone. Let me just ask a question. If life is that quick, why are we making decisions or thinking that we're in control and making decisions based off of a mist? Instead of making decisions based off something that's going to be gone, that's going to happen longer than just a mist that's going to appear and be gone. Listen, this is what we talk about, making choices in light of eternity. If you make choices based on light of eternity, you're not making your choices or decisions based off the here and now. There's so many like people that are living and making your decisions based off of today. And it's based off of what makes you happy. And I think the problem with making decisions off of what makes you happy is that there's other people that have tried to get happy off the things that you're trying to get happy on. And it doesn't last. But there is a king who says, seek first my kingdom. What he means by that is seek me first. And all these things will be added unto you. So you may struggle with pride if you put people down. You may struggle with pride if you plan like you're in control. And finally, you may struggle with pride if you prioritize yourself over everything else. He continues on in verse 16. He says, as it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. It just really seems like verse 17 is kind of out of place. I'm being real with you for just a second. It seems like it's out of place, and I'll try to make sense of it in just a second. But again, you may struggle with pride if you prioritize yourself over everything else. Listen, I know what I'm about to say is going to go against everything that the world's telling you right now. It's going to go against this grain. I know what I'm about to tell you is actually going to be difficult for you because I know it's difficult for me. In fact, on Monday, the student team and I, we went out to lunch to celebrate Maddie coming on staff. It was our very first day in the office, and so we went to Jose Peppers, and we had fun. It was a great time, and we were just having a good time. We had a great waitress, and one of the times she was walking away, she had tattoos all over her arms, but one of the tattoos that she had right here on her forearm really stuck out to me. And it literally just said, walk by faith. And so she left, and then she came back. And as she came back to the table, I just said, hey, I just want you to know I like your tattoo. And so she's telling us a little bit about the story behind it. She's like, this is actually the tattoo I regret the most. And she's telling us this, and God just, as audibly as I could hear it, I'm not saying he spoke to me like I'm speaking to you, but in my heart, God says, I want you to ask her how you can pray for her. I said no. I said no because I said, God, do you not know how much I have to get done this afternoon? God, you know how full my plate, I told you about how full my plate was. I told you about all the different things, messages I got to get done and get turned in so I can be done with this. I'm so overwhelmed, and you're asking me to stop and pray for her. No, we're going to get our check, we're going to write it, and we're going to get out of here. I don't want to hear it anymore. And God has a way of keeping after me, because he kept after me. Kept telling me, he said it again, he's like, I want you to pray for her. So we're leaving. And I just finally was like, okay, I don't think he's gonna let me let this one go. So I swallowed my pride, and because I had pride. And I looked at her and I said, hey, I know where that tattoo comes from. I know the Bible verse actually, and it's walk by faith and not by sight. How can I pray for you? And then for the next, I don't think the student team was even it was just me and her in that moment. They were still there around me, but she starts telling me about everything that's happening in her life at this present moment. And she tells me about her son that she wishes that she could see again, but can't because she was in prison, and she's trying to get him back after 3 years of living the quote unquote her right life. And I almost missed it. I prayed for her yesterday morning. I know that at least I'm gonna go back, because that's the next part of the instruction was for me to go back and tell her about Jesus. I tell you that you ask me if I've had an opportunity to go back to Jose Peppers. That's okay. So I understand that when I tell you that you may have pride if you prioritize yourself over everything else, and that this world is telling you to prioritize yourself over everything, how hard it is. Because it takes a moment to where I die to myself and to what I want. It's not easy. But listen, if you're here today and you've not had a moment where God has confronted you with something, you want to do something and he's saying, no, I want you to go do this way. Or if you haven't had a moment where you're like, okay, God, he said, I want you to do this, but you're struggling. If you haven't had one of those moments in a while, just like I hadn't had one of those moments in a while, you're dealing with pride. Or maybe you're here today and the priority that you have is this thing that I like to call one day. One day I'll get serious about my faith. One day I'll go all in for Jesus. One day I'll read my Bible. One day I'll pray. One day I'll fast. One day I'll get involved in serving. One day I'll give my life to Jesus. The problem with one day is that one day will never come. And so to overcome the prioritization of yourself, Jesus would say you have to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. Deny yourself, deny what you want. I wanted to go and write a message. It's so horrible of a pastor to say I didn't have enough time, or I didn't feel like I had enough time to stop and remember that the people were the reason I got into this. So I had to deal with my pride. So do you struggle with pride? Are you here today and man, all you've done is joked up and cut up the entire freaking message, and you're not listening to a thing I said? Is that you, and you need to deal with your heart in a second because you have so much pride that you think that this doesn't apply to me? Man, one of the ways you can do that is maybe by looking at those three things, but maybe, just maybe, one of the great questions that you can ask is, what is it like to be on the other side of me? Maybe you need to think about that for a second. Or maybe just dare you to ask the question to someone else. One of your friends, hey, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Do you find me to be prideful? Do you find me to be this? That's a great question. But if you kind of get into your segue and you're like me, and maybe this message just is for my heart, my guess it is. And you struggle with pride, the good news today is that James doesn't leave us in our pride. He says in verse 10, humble yourselves. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. The antidote to pride is humility. Here's the good thing about humility. Humility looks good on everyone. Girls, it is the little black dress that you want to make sure that you're wearing every single day. Gentlemen, it is the suit that you want to wear and you want to walk out. It is the only game that you need is humility. It looks good on every single one of us, and humility is available to us. Humility is available to you tonight. Listen, and all it takes, he says, humble yourself before the Lord. It's literally saying, okay, God, hey, I'm gonna throw my hands up. I'm tired of putting people down. I'm tired of planning like I'm in control. I'm tired of prioritizing myself. God, I don't wanna do it my way anymore. I wanna do it your way. I'm coming to you. I'm looking to you. Why do we look to God? Because he is the perfect example of what humility looks like. Philippians chapter 2 tells us that Jesus, when he's coming down the ladder, he humbled himself to the point of death on a cross. So we have got to stop taking our eyes and fixing them on ourselves and begin to take them and fix them on the Savior, Jesus. He is the sacrifice that paid the penalty for your life and for my life. And the good news today is that when we look at the cross, we can't look at ourselves, which means that we look at him and we see the humility that he has, and we drops us to our knees and we get it from him, and we stop looking to ourselves, because when we look to ourselves, we have pride. So I want to challenge you with something. If your answer to the question tonight is, man, I'm struggling with pride, in just a few moments, we're gonna sing a song. This may not be for everyone in here. That's okay. But maybe for some of you tonight, instead of standing up and singing a song, another song to Jesus, you humble yourselves before him. I think the greatest act of worship that we can give God tonight isn't another song that we're gonna sing and go through the motions. The greatest act of worship that we could give God would be to humble our hearts and come before him and say, God, not my way, your way. I don't wanna do it my way. I wanna look to you. This is the greatest act of worship that we could give him tonight. So maybe, just maybe, we don't stand up and sing. Maybe, just maybe, some of us, we need to get on our knees and get real before God and say, you know what? I'm crying out to you. Maybe, just maybe, some of us, you don't want to get on your knees. That's fine. Like you can sit down and you can just do business with God. He is here. He is available to you. Are you too proud to keep living your life the way that you're living it? Or are you ready for a totally different life? And all it is just a step towards him tonight. So I want to challenge some of you. Maybe it isn't that you stand up and sing right away. Maybe for some of you, the challenge tonight is to sit or kneel or look up to the cross, look to the Savior. But there are some of you, I'm gonna be real honest with you. You're the person I was talking at the very beginning. You're coming and you're checking this out, and I'm so glad you're checking it out. But I want you to know that there's a Savior who does call you by name, and that he wants a relationship with you. And if you're here tonight and you haven't placed your faith and hope into Jesus, the greatest humbling act that you could ever do is just say, Jesus, I want the life that you have to offer me. And just follow him. It's not hard, it's not complicated. I'm gonna follow you. In fact, I want to give you that opportunity right now. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I want to invite everyone in the crowd to say this, just so we can say this. So repeat after me. Say, dear Jesus, I come to you. I ask that you would become my Savior. I want to live my life your way and follow you. With every head bowed and every eye closed, I'm just curious tonight, is there someone here that you laid down your pride and you picked up a relationship with Jesus for the first time? If you started a relationship with Jesus for the first time, will you raise your hand where you're at? I gave my life to Jesus. All right, I'm gonna pray, and here's what. I'm gonna let you just deal with God. Don't feel like you have to rush to the stage and worship. Again, one of the greatest acts of worship that you can do is just to humble yourselves before the Lord tonight. So Jesus, we give you this time. May our hearts be led to worship of you. It's in your name we pray. Just spend time with Jesus.